part, as my own child identifies as LGBTQ+. My own child will be a senior this year, and I'm at Independence High School in Independence, Kansas. And in my research in this presentation, I reached out to some of my students, my former students, and I also asked for my own child's perspective when it comes to inclusivity in the classroom. And I'll share those slides with you later. We'll also learn about specific techniques that you can use to create an inclusive classroom within your school. And I'm going to give you a set of resources that will help you with items that you can use personally. Like I have this pronoun button from GLSEN that identifies my pronouns. I got some of these buttons and stickers for my own students and passed them out as they wanted them. I have one outside my door. It's a sticker next to my nameplate outside my door that identifies my pronouns. So I'll give you resources like that to help further educate you, and where you can also find free and kind of swag like this that you can use in your classroom. Okay. First thing I want to talk about, one of the questions that I was asked was, in this presentation, am I going to focus on a specific set of ages? And I said, well, I can cover elementary through high school, because we do have, we'll look at the stages of development here. We do have some elementary kids who are questioning. And we'll look at what's developmentally appropriate from about first, second grade on up through adolescence and young adulthood. So when we look at the stages of development, this goes into why it's important to have an inclusive classroom. Cognitive development, cognitions are thought process. So at 7 years and up, children are starting to form more concrete thoughts, from concrete thoughts into more abstract thoughts. So when you're looking at a child before this stage of development, you're looking at a child who's like, they follow the rules simply because of the rules. Rules are black and white, right and wrong. Teacher says to do this, mom says to do this, dad says to do this, whatever. And they just follow the rules blindly. Then they start to move into more abstract thoughts, and their moral compass starts to develop. So if we want to develop a community of inclusivity in our classrooms and in our school, we have to model that. We have to reinforce behaviors that are positive. We have to reinforce pronoun usage, name usage, gender neutrality in the classroom, stuff like that, because those kids are starting to form their own moral compass. We look at social emotional development 5 years and up, understanding feelings and building relationships. So they're starting to explore their feelings, their emotions. They're starting to get to that point where they can express their emotions and feelings better. Less temper tantrums that you saw when they were toddlers. They're starting to use their words, sometimes still behaviors and actions, to express their emotions. They look at themselves and they compare themselves to other students, to other kids, to their siblings, to their other relatives. And they start to maybe develop either feelings of satisfaction or inferiority. They're looking at forming their own identity. How many children align themselves with their parents until they reach a certain stage of development, and then they start to form their own identity. We're also looking at stages of intimacy versus isolation. Kids crave intimacy, and what I mean by that is not necessarily sexual intimacy, but relationship intimacy. They're looking for close relationships. Can I trust this person? Is this who are my go-to people? Who are my true friends? They start to realize that they're not going to be liked by everyone. They're not going to like everyone. How do they decide what's a healthy relationship versus what's unhealthy, what ties to cut, and what relationships to develop? Then we're looking at physical development from ages 6 and up. Changes in height and weight. This is where boys and girls start to become more distinct. So like, where do I fit in as far as gender is concerned? We're all assigned a sex at birth, but sometimes students and children don't feel comfortable in that gender identity or the sex necessarily that they were born into, especially as they start to reach puberty. We'll look at how does it affect a child who develops later than their peers or earlier than their peers? And there are studies in that, like boys that develop earlier versus later, girls that develop earlier versus later, and how it affects them cognitively, social, emotionally. All of these things feed into each other. So if you have a child who's delayed in puberty compared to their peers physically, how does that affect them socially, emotionally? If you have a freshman boy, this is the perfect example, freshman. If you work in the high school, you will have freshman boys who are still like 4 feet 6 inches tall and squeaky voice, and some of them are 6 feet tall, 200 pounds, beards. How does that affect them, you know, as far as like relationships go? Next slide. Okay, so we've all seen this before as educators, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. This is another reason, social emotional piece of it, why it is so important to have inclusivity in our classrooms. Physiologically, safety, love and belonging. Students have to feel that they are accepted for who they are. They have to feel safe, especially from bullying in the schools. They have to have their physiological needs met before they can have any kind of positive self-esteem, before they can have any sense of confidence, of well-being, before they can move up into that problem-solving stage of self-actualization. How can we expect a freshman, for example, to focus on Romeo and Juliet when they're worried about the kids in their English class bullying them, or they're worried about that teacher who's making judgments against them because of their gender, sexuality, or maybe even the gender, sexuality identification of their family of origin? So it's really important that we as educators meet those basic needs in order for our students to feel comfortable enough to move up into that higher level of esteem and self-actualization. Next slide. So the second objective, what are some things that you can do in your classroom to make it more inclusive? Introduce yourself with preferred pronouns. First day of school, if I'm introducing myself to my students, my name is Miss Clay. This is my 21st year of teaching. My pronouns are her, her, hers. So she, her, hers. So, and I have this button on my lanyard, students can see that. I always pass out note cards the first day of school, and I ask the students, you know, name, do you go by a nickname? Pronouns, do you have a preferred pronoun? I ask them fun questions like, you know, hobbies, favorite candy, stuff like that. We play 2 truths and a lie, where they have to, you know, pick out my 2 truths and my 1 lie that I tell them. So it's not just enough to ask them their preferred name or their preferred pronouns. You actually have to use them. And as long as I've been doing this, and I consider myself to be pretty seasoned, and it's in my own home, I still make mistakes. I had a student a couple years ago, his pronouns, he, his, him, but he, his, him had pink hair in my classroom, and I kept messing up, and I would catch myself because he was very active in my class. I would say, yes, exactly what he said. And I would catch myself slipping up, and I'm like, oh. So one day, after the students were put to task, I took him out in the hallway and I said, I am so sorry, I keep messing up your pronouns. And he's like, it's okay, Miss Clay. I was like, no, I know better. I know better than this. I am so sorry. And he goes, I think it's bothering you more than it's bothering me. And in that moment, I was like, yes, because I know better. I mean, it's in my own home. Most of my friends identify as LGBTQ. I know better. Why do I keep messing up? And I would catch myself, like I said, really quickly. If you find yourself doing that, not making a big deal out of it in the moment, apologize and move on is the best thing to do. Not in front of the whole class. Like I said, I pulled him out in the hallway, but apologize and move on and just try better next time. I told this student, I said, I seriously, I'm not trying to be a jerk. I'm not misgendering you on purpose, but I'm still so sorry about this. And then life goes on. We moved on. Using gender neutral language. Just yesterday, I went and enrolled my child for their senior year. And it asked, there was a drop down in Infinite Campus for sex, gender. It was either male or female. There was no other. There was no don't prefer to answer. It was very clear, female, male. And those were the only 2 options given. And I actually pointed out to my child, look, these are the only 2 options that were given. Later on, when we went to get the physical done, the physical actually said male, female, other. And I asked, you know, what do you want me to mark? And they were just like, I don't know. I feel like this is a trick question. Like automatically on the defense is where my child goes. Automatically on the defense. Like, I feel like this is a trick question. I'm like, well, I will answer it however you want me to answer it. So they told me just to mark other, and that's what I did. Things like that. When you send home permission slips, when you send home something for the parents to sign, to make sure that you're putting parent, guardian, not mom, dad, that you're giving options for, not preferring to answer for gender or sex, giving that other mark, not just male, female. That language is very important. When you're addressing your class using gender neutral language, don't say boys and girls, don't say ladies and gentlemen, to say stuff like class or people or students or learners, something like that, where people don't feel like they don't fit into that perfect little bubble of boys, girls, ladies, gentlemen, men, women. Deterring derogatory language and bullying is very important too. When you hear a student say something like, "That's so gay," to be able to step in and stop and say, you know, we don't use that kind of language in here. If you don't like the situation, okay, you can say that's stupid, or I don't like this situation, but to attach that label of gay synonymous with stupid or not liking. The best case example I can think of for this was at Christmas time, I was actually having a conversation with my cousin's son, and he's about 8 or 9 years old. And he told me, he's like, "There's a gay kid in my class I don't like." And I instantly went into counselor mode. Like, my boyfriend was sitting next to me, and he said, "I could see it just kind of wipe over your face. Like, you went from cousin to like teacher counselor." And I just said, "Well, what is it you don't like about him?" And he's like, "Well, he's gay." Okay, but what is it specifically you don't like about him? "Well, he chases me on the playground, he tries to kiss me." That's different. I said, okay. I said, so he's not respecting your space, like your personal space. That's what you don't like about him. It's not necessarily that he's gay. It's that you don't like that he's bothering you. "Well, yeah." And I said, okay, you have the right to say no, and people should respect that. And I said, so you need to talk to an adult that you trust. And then it hits me, I'm that adult that he trusts because he's telling me this story. So with that information, we talked about anybody who chases you on the playground, boy or girl or whatever, you have a right to say no. You have a right to your personal space. That's what's really bothering you, not the fact that he's gay. And I said, now we need to talk to your parents. You know, so I pulled his mom aside and I said something to her about it. I said, regardless of what your feelings are about LGBT community, what you need to know is that this child is harassing your son and it needs to stop. So you might want to get a hold of the school or the teacher or something. So in his head, it was, I don't like this boy because he's gay. No, you don't like this child because he's harassing you at school, and that does need to stop. So teaching children appropriate boundaries, appropriate language, modeling that in the classroom is really important to avoid this bullying situations. Creating a climate in your classroom that perpetuates a positive experience for all students is really important. And here are some ways that you can do that. Having each student feel welcome. I mean, we know as educators, we've got those kids, right? We have those kids regardless that kind of like really make us earn our paychecks. They should never feel that. My child comes home telling me who the homophobic teachers are in her building. So children should never feel that. Whatever your personal opinion is on anything, not just LGBTQ, but anything, those children should never feel that. They should feel welcome and free of judgment in your classroom. Your classroom might be the only place that feels safe for them, and that's important. You can identify yourself as an ally or an advocate. So what's the difference? I consider myself an ally my entire life. I've always been supportive of the LGBTQ community. I switched over to advocacy when my child came out to me. That's when I decided I needed to be more active, and I became part of Project Q&A. I do these types of presentations. I have in my classroom, and I'll show you on a slide, but I have in my classroom free mom hug stickers, and I have this welcoming schools window cling that I can put on my door, just to let students know that I am a safe person that they can come to. Now, when you're identified as an ally, you're going to have those students come to you. What do you do in those moments? It depends on how comfortable you feel with those conversations. So one thing I would suggest is getting kind of a read from them on, are they coming out to you specifically because they trust you, or are they out, like completely out? If they're coming out to you because they trust you, that's a huge deal for them. Like, thank you for trusting me with this information. And then you can ask, like, you know, like, are you out, or is this something that you're sharing with me? And kind of get into, like, you know, why they're sharing it with you. Is it because they're comfortable with you? because you don't want to out the students. I had plenty of students come out to me and their parents don't know. The other students don't know. The other teachers don't know, because they trust me with that. And they see the rainbow stickers. They know that they can come out to me and trust me with that information. So please don't betray that trust if they do decide to come out to you. I have other students who are out to everyone, and that's great. It just depends on their level of like where they're out in this world. So identifying yourself as someone that they can trust. Kids are looking for that. Even when I went and judged forensics and debate at area schools, I'm looking in the classrooms. Oh, there's a rainbow sticker on her desk. She's an ally or an advocate, Consider diversity in art, literature, music, lesson plans, etc. So for example, if you're going to have posters up in your room, maybe have posters that depict same-sex families, like parents that are same-sex, or not even LGBTQ, but children of people of color, children in wheelchairs, children with different abilities. Lesson plans, I made sure to, like if I'm teaching a literature lesson, the author is a person of LGBT community, I might mention that, like this person identifies themselves as LGBTQ, and we talk about that, maybe how it influences their literature. Same way with music, any other lesson plans. Grouping students by other means than gender. So it's really tempting to split the boys and girls up, right? Boys on this side, girls on this side, boys do this, girls do that. But then, what do you do with that child that's questioning? Which side do they go to, boys or girls? We had a transgendered student a couple years ago. The principal gave him a key to one of the staff bathrooms because he didn't feel comfortable going to the boys or girls bathroom. If your administration is willing to do that, that's great. Just not setting them up for those uncomfortable situations. Gender neutral play is really tempting, really easy, especially if you overhear children talking. Well, that's a boy toy. That's a girl toy. Boys don't play with dolls. Girls don't play with trucks. To try to encourage gender neutral play where boys can play with whatever toy they want, girls can play with whatever toy they want. We have girls who wrestle here at our high school. Things like that where they're not, like I said, you're not setting them up for that uncomfortable situation. Also, when you're looking at diversity in lesson plans, Ed.S and StoryCorps have some awesome LGBTQ presenters, speakers, and you can incorporate those into your lesson plans as well. So this is just a few of the things I have in my classroom. I went to a KNEA workshop on racial and social justice, and they asked me my preferred pronouns. So my name tag had my preferred pronouns on it. So you might consider that anytime you have like name tags, if you ask the children, and here's another thing, not creating uncomfortable situations, don't force it upon anybody. You may have some students on that little note card I mentioned who want to identify their pronouns to you, but they don't necessarily want everybody else in the school to know about it. So you can ask that question too, like when we're talking one-on-one, what pronouns, what name do you want me to use? But in the great wide world, do you want me to stick to your legal name, your birth name, your birth pronouns, things like that? My child is like that. My child, anytime we're approaching a new situation, I will ask, how do you want me to introduce you? Do you want me to introduce you as your birth name, or do you want me to introduce you as the name that he has chosen for himself? And I go by that radar. I pick up on my kid and what they want. So I also picked up some buttons and stickers for some of my students. Like I said, I have one on my lanyard, my free mom hugs, which might have to turn into a free mom elbow bump this year, or jazz fingers or something like that, since we really can't hug. And then on my door, I have this GLSEN inclusive school sticker. So anybody passing by my room will know that this is a safe place for LGBTQ plus children. So, okay, so I reached out to some of my former students and asked, I said, I'm getting ready for this presentation. Could you please tell me what teachers and educators could have done better? So this one is cut off because he went into a specific story about a teacher, which I'll share with you, but he mentioned her name and I don't want to call anybody out. So to be honest with you, the majority of teachers I talked openly about with my transition and whatnot were incredibly supportive. Using the right pronouns and name was never a problem. Everyone wanted to learn. So people were willing to learn, according to this student. The only problem was, and he went into detail about a specific teacher, because this student has a phobia of bugs. And this teacher said to him, if you were a real man, you wouldn't be scared of bugs, real men are the ones who killed the spiders. So we still had that, you know, misconception, those gender expectations, because real men can be scared of spiders, real men can be scared of bugs, but in that teacher's head, it's like, if you want to be a real man, you better act like one. And that was the only negative experience that he had. So to him, using the proper name, using the proper pronouns was really important. Another student that I reached out to, which I was actually kind of proud of myself in the moment, I could not remember this student's dead name. When I first met this student, they were still going by their dead name. And then the next like 3 or 4 years that I knew them went by a different name. That's the name I called him. And to be honest, I was like, I've forgotten your dead name. That's like a huge victory for you. And he was very excited that I'd forgotten his dead name, that we had used it so much, and that was his identity, that his dead name had been forgotten. And I was actually brainstorming with another teacher, like, do you remember the student's dead name? And they were like, no. I'm like, right? That's awesome. I'm so proud of myself that I forgot their dead name. Those little get to know me sheets that most pass out should include what your preferred name and pronoun is, and then actually use them. Separating games into girls and boys is problematic. Debating LGBT topics like gay marriage or adoption rights is literally showing how many of your peers hate you and don't think you deserve rights. Making sure not to out kids to their parents. Okay, this is important, I think, too. So he hit on a few things that I'd already discussed. Using preferred pronouns and names. Debating such topics. If you're going to debate those types of topics in your classroom, you really need to set some boundaries at the beginning. Be like, this needs to be, you know, reliable, valid data. It can't be based just purely on emotions, and, you know, debating those sort of things and coming at it in a respectful sort of way, or just choosing not to debate those sort of things at all in your classroom, because you know it's just setting kids up to be hurt. Outing students to their parents. Okay, as educators, we do have an obligation to, you know, as mandated reporters, to report such things as abuse, neglect, harm to self or others. A kid coming out to you as part of the LGBTQ plus community is not a mandated reporting situation. It actually, like he says here, could do more harm than good. That's why you ask. You ask, like, well, you know, thank you for telling me, you know, thank you for coming out to me, thank you for sharing this part of you with me. How many people know, or who all knows, or do your parents know, or like, how comfortable do you feel? Like, those sort of conversations need to happen, because I have had, like I said, students come out to me who've not come out to their parents, their family, other students. You have to keep that confidential as best you can, and not out them, even if you think it's in the student's best interest. Now, you will have some students who maybe are struggling with their identity, and that's a great time to have a conversation about, do you feel like you need to talk to a counselor about this? I will even go with you to the counselor if you want me to. Once you get into that counselor's office, though, do not speak for the child. Let the child do all the talking. Let the child reveal what he or she wants to reveal to the counselor at their own pace. And that may not be ever, you know, but at least you put it out there that you're willing to go with them if they need your help. But don't ever out them. Don't ever out them, even to their own parents. That's what he identified as being most important. I wish there was a way I could have talked more personally with someone. I struggled a lot with my identity and mental health, but I felt as though I couldn't speak to the counselors. The one time I tried, my mom was told and nothing came from it, and she got really angry with me for faking being depressed. Once again, if a student comes out to you because they trust you with that information, make sure that you find out how out they are before you discuss this. It's not something also to discuss with your best teacher friends. They trusted you with this information, and they trusted you to keep it to yourself and not, you know, talk about them behind their back. So I think this teacher or this counselor probably had the student's best interest at heart, but it actually ended up causing more damage at home. I do know that this student was just counting down the days till they turned 18 and they could get out of their parents' house and just truly be themselves. I have this former student on Snapchat, and I remember seeing the 18th birthday Snapchats where it's like change their name, change their gender, like just they felt like they cut their hair, they dyed it, you know, just to be more of who they felt like they could express themselves as. So. And I think this is the last one. This child was super excited that I contacted her about this. She's like, oh, I think just having an environment that's safe and accepting helps a lot. It's nice to know there's at least one place or person you can turn to for support. And I'm telling you, they're looking in your classroom for those signs. They are looking and listening for how you talk, the language you use, and the climate, the tone that you set in your classroom to know whether or not you are a safe person for them to talk to. Holding other students accountable for their comments and actions. Their jokes can be harmful. That's where I said the language is really important. Stopping that negative language and stopping that bullying and explaining, like, it's okay to be frustrated in the situation, but don't say this is gay. It's okay for, like, you prefer to play with trucks, he prefers to play with dolls, and that's okay. I think some of the best support is educating people on LGBTQIA+ issues, especially since it's not really something that's talked about in schools. Ignorance plays a huge part in the problem after all. And here's where I'm coming from too. I have made mistakes. As an educator, as a parent, as a friend, I have made mistakes. It's never too late to do the right thing. It is never too late to do the right thing, to apologize, to say I was uneducated at the time. I have taken it upon myself to educate myself better. It's okay to ask questions. I am that friend who's asking my lesbian best friend questions. Please explain this to me. And I'm not asking you in a derogatory way. I genuinely want to know. I genuinely want to know the right answer so I know the right thing to say or do. And it's changing. It's constantly changing. I even asked Brandon, please look over my slides, and is there anything that popped out at you that I shouldn't say, that I'm approaching in the wrong direction? Homosexuality was in the first edition of the DSM, the Diagnostic and Statistics Manual that we use to diagnose mental health disorders. In that first edition, it was in there. We're on the 5th edition now. It's no longer in there. And the only reason gender identity issues are still involved in the DSM-5 is because some people struggle with it. Just because a child is questioning doesn't mean they have a diagnosable mental health disorder. Could they have anxiety and depression? Could it have something to do with their questioning? Yes. And there are counselors out there who specialize in helping the LGBTQ+ community. But that does not automatically mean that they are, if they're struggling, that they have a mental health disorder. And it's okay to, I don't want to say it's okay to make mistakes, but it's okay if you're genuinely trying to educate yourself and learn, and if you're growing and improving, to look back and admit to your mistakes and then forgive yourself, ask for forgiveness when appropriate, and then move on. And I think that's where this student was coming from, is ignorance plays a huge part in the problem. And you guys here listening to this are taking that to better educating yourself. So here are some resources, and I think Brandon's going to share the slideshow with you, but these are hyperlinks to different sources that I find helpful, especially the GLSEN. The Human Rights Campaign is a good one too, but the GLSEN, like I said, is where I got these buttons and the stickers. Free mom hugs, there's not a chapter around here. I think the closest one is in Kansas City. The Human Rights Campaign, though, they have a lot of resources, really good resources for education, like specifically for teachers and educators to use. So like, what do you do when kids question you about what does it mean to be gay or lesbian or, trans? And I think that later on this afternoon at 1 o'clock, that presenter is going to go over those specific terms with you guys. The CDC has some great stuff too, the ACLU, and of course the Trevor Project. These are all really good resources, but you should be able, if you want supplies for your classroom, GLSEN is a good place to start. So, and if you want to know more, my area is, high school, young adults. I tried to cover some elementary stuff today, but the GLSEN, they really have a lot of good resources for those younger kids too. So that's all I had planned, and only lasted 30 minutes. So if you guys have any questions, I can answer them as best I can, and Brandon obviously can answer too.
If you want to just go ahead and ask the questions now,
that's fine.
The chat, just go ahead and unmute yourself and ask any questions you may have. Like Sally said, Gleason is a really great resource. They have or GSLEN. I think it stands for Gay Lesbian Student Education Network. They have lesson plans. If you're an elementary school teacher, they have coloring sheets that feature prominent LGBTQ activists such as Martha P. Johnson, Harvey Milk, and also, since most of the educators here are from Southeast Kansas, a really great thing that you should know is that the gay flag or the rainbow flag that you can often see the creator was from Southeast Kansas. He grew up in Parsons, so a little area history lesson. So if you have any questions, Sally's here to answer questions. Do you have any ways that, like, if you ever do get pushback from administration, how you can work with administration to still be supportive in your school?
Yes, so my administration is pretty supportive. He will admit, though, that he doesn't know a lot about LGBTQ plus community. But even just this morning, I got a text from him that said, good luck with your Q&A today. I know this is something near and dear to you. Have a great day. So he is supportive. I think that as far as I've been lucky in that respect, as far as pushback goes, I mean, I would probably turn it around on the administration and just be like, you know, what part of this makes you uncomfortable? You know, what part of supporting our students makes you uncomfortable? What part of supporting this particular population of our students makes you uncomfortable? You would think that you would be, I don't want to say grateful, but appreciative that you have staff who are willing to be supportive of this certain population of students, that we understand and we know how to best meet their needs. Social emotional part of education has really gained a lot of attention and emphasis over the last several years. It's part of most schools' plans, you know, that we provide social and emotional support for our students, and it would fit under that. So if nothing else, you could say this fits under our social emotional goal for our building, you know.
Jamie in the chat had a question. How would you suggest introducing this to your administration? Or a plan to your administration on being inclusive?
I know that some schools have tried to set up like the Gay Straight Alliance, GSAs, and they've gotten pushback. I mean, it's no different than any other student-led organization, and you'd have to maybe really emphasize that as a teacher, as an educator, I'm just here to provide support, but it's going to be student-led, just like FCA is, right? Fellowship of Christian Athletes, that we have to provide equal opportunity for all students. I would probably, here's what I have done in the past. I make the students draft the plan. I had students come to me a couple years ago, and they said, I had a group of students come to me, we want to start an environmental club. I had another group of students come to me, we want to start a Gay Straight Alliance. So I said, hey, whoever, I want you to draft a plan. Whoever drafts the plan first and gets to me first, they're the one who gets me as the sponsor, because I just didn't have time in my schedule to do both. So environmental club got to me first, but I made the students do it. This is what the students are saying they need. This is what the students are saying they want. It's not my agenda. This is what the students are saying their needs are. And as an ally, I'm willing to just be a sponsor, just to be an adult presence in the room to make sure no funny business happens or whatever while they meet at the school. So I would actually put it back on the students, but I'm high school. So it may be different at the elementary level. At the elementary level, you're probably going to have to be more of an ally or an advocate with your administration. But some administrators hear that. Other administrators are going to hear it's a legal issue. You know, like legally, you cannot discriminate against these students. If you're going to have an FCA, then you need to have a Gay Straight Alliance, just to provide that opportunity, equal opportunity for all students. So some administrators will listen to that more than they will, you know, the tugging at the heartstrings, like this is what's best for the students.
Do we have any more questions? All right, I think that's it. Thank you all for attending, and thank you, Sally, for doing this wonderful presentation. It was great.
Thank
Um,
you.
I hope you guys can join us this afternoon for our Understanding LGBTQIA language, and I will be sending out the slides and a recording of this later this afternoon. So thank you all for joining, and have a good rest of your day and enjoy the start of your school year.